Okay, welcome to class 21. This is the practice test walkthrough. Um, this test it has less randomization in it, less variation between the tests you guys are going to be taking individually than the previous ones, because for a lot of this material, this is the first time I've taught it, so I haven't had the chance to build up as large of a database of questions. Um, that said, all the previous rules apply. You can use your notes, but you cannot use the internet. So you will be using the lockdown browser to keep you from accessing ChatGPT. Um, and, my underlying philosophy here is that taking notes is good. You should take notes. And the process of taking notes is educational. But the goal of critical thinking is to make you an independent thinker, be able to do things for yourself, and therefore turning over the work of critical thinking to ChatGPT goes directly against the purpose of the course. All right. So again, we're going to have a mix of um, multiple choice and short answer questions. So we start. First up, which of the following are true of heuristics as they have been outlined in this section of this course? Okay. So remember, this section of the course is on um, cognitive bias, but one of the first terms that we encountered thinking about cognitive bias was the idea of a heuristic. So let's see what we can do here. Item 1, heuristics are mental shortcuts that work most of the time, but can also lead to errors. Well, that's right. That's definitely true of them. A heuristic is any widespread systematic distortion in the way people think. Oh, no, wait, that's a different idea. That is the idea of a cognitive bias, right? And so we need to be clear on what the relationship between these two ideas are, the cognitive bias and the heuristic. Cognitive bias is a distortion in thinking, and then a heuristic is one potential source for distortions in thinking, that is, people taking mental shortcuts. So we're not going to check the second one. After that, anytime you use a heuristic, you make a mistake. Well, that directly contradicts item 1, so that can't be true. All cognitive biases are the result of heuristics. That was a suggestion that came up. Kahneman and Tversky initially thought that heuristics could explain a lot of cognitive biases, but I've been emphasizing that some of them, just like the confirmation bias, for instance, might be structural features of our cognition, but they're not necessarily shortcuts. So this one is not true, and the one beneath it is true. All right. Which of the following are examples of perceptual constancies? Now remember, when we were talking about perception, we talked about two ways that perception was disconnected from your inputs for perception, right? The stimulus, where the stimulus I'm thinking of is just the proximal stimulus, for instance, the image on your retina or the vibration on your eardrum, right? Um, so one thing that happens is with ambiguous images, you can see them one way or another. So the perception changes even though the stimulus doesn't. Another was what we're talking about now, perceptual constancies, where the stimulus is actually changing, but your perception is not. And the first example I gave of that was the first one up here. When you observe a rotating three-dimensional object, you perceive it as maintaining its shape, even though the two-dimensional image on your retina is shifting, right? So, think about the rotating pen. Here you're seeing a long rectangle. Here you're seeing a circle, but you perceive it as one shape because you are inferring three dimensions from the two dimensions on your image, on your retina. That one's true. When you close your eyes, you still see little blobs of color because we're always perceiving something. That doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. That looks like it's there, Um, for people who didn't do the reading, but see perceptual constancies, maybe that means you're constantly perceiving, right? So that's a trap for people who are just going on the meaning of the set of the words. When you observe an ambiguous image, such as a vase that can be two faces, your perception can change, even though the stimulus on your retina does not. Now, see, this is the ambiguous image. This is the flip side of the perceptual constancy. So this is not what we were talking about. It's closer, it's related to it, but it's not the same thing. It's actually the mirror image of it. When you observe an object getting closer, you perceive it as staying the same size, even though the image on your retina is getting bigger. There, that's another example. If you hear a car going off, you perceive the noise as constant because it's annoying. That's just random. That's clearly not it. Okay, which of the following are true of the reconstructive model of memory? On the reconstructive model, we are constantly filling in gaps in our memory using a process that looks like inference. Yes, this is exactly right. That's a major part of the definition of the model, right? We remember we contrasted the reconstructive model with the static model, and the static model is how people often think memory works, where it's just like a video recording. It's the same each time you play it back, or maybe it's like putting a box in a warehouse, right? You put a box in a warehouse, um, and when you open up the box, the contents haven't changed. But that's not right. So item 2 here on the reconstructive model of memory, memory is like a video recording. No, that's exactly wrong. That's the static model of memory. On the reconstructive model of memory, we rewrite our memories each time we remember them. That's true. That's another way that it's reconstructive. It's constantly being, our memories are constantly being updated and gaps are being filled in, smoothed over, things get simplified. The reconstructive model of memory has been replaced by the more accurate static model of memory. That's the opposite of what is true. The reconstructive model of memory does not allow our memories to be affected by cognitive bias. Now, that is also the opposite of what is true, right? In fact, the whole point of the reconstructive model is to recognize that cognitive bias is everywhere, including in our own memories. All right, framing effect. We talked about the framing effect in two contexts, memory and decision making, right? And it is well, the idea was that the way questions are worded can affect the way we make decisions or remember things in ways that aren't necessarily rational. So if we ask how long the movie was, we get a different answer than if we ask how short the movie was. Or if we talk about how many people would be, how much money would be lost in a choice versus how much money would be saved. That can also affect outcomes. So what do we have here? The effect that causes us to make generalizations based on the most available examples, that's the availability heuristic. No. The effect of the wording of a question can have on the way something is remembered or the way an action is chosen. There, that is just what I just said. So that's the correct answer. I'm going to read the other 3 to be thorough, just in case I'm making a mistake. The effect that causes us to be more risk-seeking in decision-making when we feel like we are trying to avoid a loss. Well, that can interact with the framing effect, right? So that's loss aversion. Loss aversion can interact with framing effect in certain kinds of decisions, but it's still a different. The effect that causes memories of emotionally charged events to be more reliable than memories of ordinary events. That's the issue of flashbulb memories, and actually it's the exact opposite of what's true. Emotional charge doesn't correlate well with the reliability of memory either way. The effect that causes memories to be more accurate when you're in the same perceptual context you were in when the memory was first encoded. That's also not the correct answer. All right. So we got the correct definition there. All right. Next, we have our first short answer question. So consider the following online dialogue lightly edited from a meme. So again, this is a conversation that I encountered online, and it illustrates some cognitive biases. So the thing here is just to figure out what cognitive biases are being illustrated. So Tesla is advertising that its new Cybertruck is bulletproof. The conversation takes place below a picture of a Cybertruck that appears to have been dented by a lot of gunfire, but none of the bullets seem to have penetrated. And there's the picture there. I actually don't know if the Cybertruck is really bulletproof, and it doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation. But it could also be a false premise. Okay, Tesla fan. Honestly, I don't know how the competition isn't shitting their pants seeing the Cybertruck survive this kind of testing. Jenny TP. This is wild, because isn't a rigid body on cars like a death trap? Like, there's a reason cars crumple the way they do when they crash. It's because it lets the body absorb a ton of the impact so it isn't transferred to the passengers. Tesla fan. It's a trade off. Given current crime rates, bullet resistance is a higher priority. Right away, you should look at that and go, wait, something's wrong. And in fact, we already have a term for what's the mistake that was just made there, the base rate fallacy. We all know, I think, that car crashes are a more common cause of death than people shooting at moving vehicles. And so that's what Jenny TP says. Which do you think is more common? Uh, Car crashes or drive-by shootings? And then Tesla fan says there are a lot of drive-by shootings. A let's play YouTube content creator called Markiplier, or was caught up in a Los Angeles gang conflict. Oh, look, that looks like a second mistake. So it looks like two cognitive biases are at work here, and I actually prompt you for them in the question. The base rate fallacy and the availability heuristic. So, um, dismiss. Tesla fan um, uh, commits the base rate fallacy, should be hyphened, and is using the availability heuristic. They use, oh, one of these days I will learn to spell. They use the base rate fallacy when they ignore the fact that car crashes are more common than people shooting at moving vehicles. And here, I'll be sure to get our definitions, and good answers will have the definitions right. The base rate fallacy happens whenever you ignore base rates like this. After they commit the base rate fallacy, they try to back it up with evidence gathered by the availability heuristic. The availability heuristic causes us to rely on the most easily remembered evidence rather than the most relevant evidence. Here, events in the lives of celebrity YouTubers are more easily remembered than actual crime statistics. Wait, I just changed that to celerity. That's funny. Celeb. Why didn't, okay, and then actual YouTube crime statistics. I'm not going to bore you by proofreading this thing in front of you, but you should proofread your own answers. Um, and this is actually sufficient. This should be enough of an answer because I'm explaining why these two things are relevant. Okay, moving on. Explain the endowment effect in 30 or more words and use an example. Okay, so um, the endowment effect is our tendency to value things more once we have them or think we have them than we would if they belonged to someone else. So standard examples are paying more to get something back than you paid to than you would pay to get it the first time. And we saw this with the experiments, right? Where, for instance, some people are given a mug, some people are given chocolate, and whichever one you're given, if you are given the option of changing, you're not likely to change, even though it's sort of random. And that is just because once something has become yours, you value it more. Um, right? But also, we talk. There was an experiment where people were given a sum of money and then had the opportunity to risk it or not risk it, and then there was financially identical experiment where you weren't given the money first; you just had the choice between two outcomes, and people became more risk-seeking when they thought that they were trying to recover a loss. But I'm not going to make you listen to me while I type this all out. Standard examples are paying more to get something back than you would um, pay it the first time. Um, yeah, we'll do something quick here. Experiments involved um, giving people experiments that demonstrated this effect involved giving people things and then observing that they would do more to keep them than they would to get them. It's still not very specific, but I would accept this answer. All right. Which is the best definition of confirmation bias as a term is used in this course? Cognitive bias that leads one to discount or ignore evidence and arguments that contradict one's current belief and to seek out evidence and arguments that confirms them. Yep, that's it. So a systematic distortion in reasoning, that is just the general definition of a cognitive bias. The fallacy of believing an argument because it has a conclusion you already accept. Ooh, that's actually a close one. I bet so if you answer that, you're probably only getting like a few points off, like 4 out of 10. Because that's obviously similar, but it's not a bias isn't a fallacy, right? Um, uh, this is framed entirely in terms of argument, so clearly it belongs to the earlier section. The cognitive bias that comes from hearing things that you've been primed to hear. Um, Nope, that's a perception thing. The cognitive bias that by chance leads you to a belief that is true or confirmed by other evidence. That's nothing. That's completely made up. Something you might click on if you hadn't been doing the reading and we're just trying to guess from the words confirmation bias. All right, 8. I won't read the whole thing out loud. I'll just summarize. So you may have heard of the QAnon conspiracy theory movement. They believe that this guy Q has been revealing secrets on far-right message boards. Because, of course, if you knew government secrets, the first thing you would do is post them to 4chan. Most of the secrets involve a hidden war between Donald Trump and a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles led by Hillary Clinton. So there was a event 2 years ago in November where a QAnon splinter group believed that John F. Kennedy Jr., the son of the late president, would return from the dead. He would arrive at the spot where his father was shot, and then he would restore Donald Trump the presidency and become his vice president. So this did not happen. Based on what we've read from the work of Leon Festinger and his colleagues, how do you think this affected the minds of his followers? Well, we know, right, that there is cognitive dissonance here, and we know that, like the UFO cult that Festinger studied, people are going to resolve the cognitive dissonance by doubling down on their false belief rather than just living with the fact that they made a mistake. So we'll do this. This case is basically the same as the UFO emergent religion, I'll use a more polite term, that Festinger studied, in that their prophecies were obviously disconfirmed. We know that this leads to cognitive dissonance, the unpleasant feeling that comes from knowing you are trapped in a contradiction, right? That's going to be a contradiction between beliefs or belief in reality, whatever. Go ahead and say that. Your beliefs don't match obvious reality. But you can also have things where your beliefs don't match your self-conception, your actions don't match your self-conception. In this case, their beliefs don't match obvious reality. We also know that rather than admitting people make a terrible mistake, that they have made a terrible, rather than admitting that they have made a terrible mistake, people will double down on their false beliefs. If this follows the pattern of the seekers, the group that Festinger studied, they will come up with an excuse for why the prophecy failed, and then become even more fervent in their belief in Q. And that should do it. And I'm certain this is at least 75 words. It's not giving me a word count. I thought I set this to give you an automatic word count. If you want an automatic word count, you can always cut and paste into like Microsoft Word or whatever. All right, two more. Which of the following is the best definition of actor-observer bias, as the term has been explained in this course? It's this one right here, the tendency to attribute one's own actions to circumstance, but say that other people's actions are the products of one's character. And the closest answer to wrong here is the one at the bottom, the tendency to overlook. The closest answer that is still wrong is down here at the bottom, the tendency to overlook flaws in your own behavior or character while at the same time being aware of the same flaws in others. This is a general thing, and it's true, but the actor-observer bias is more specific than that. It's specifically about causes of action and whether they're internal or external. So the other distractors, one is group polarization, and the other is outgroup homogeneity. So those aren't it. What is the best definition of outgroup homogeneity? Oh, hey, we were just looking at that. So it's this one here. Tendency to see those in the outgroup as all alike and interchangeable, even expendable, while viewing the in-group as made up of unique and diverse individuals. Okay, so that's it. And the practice test does not have the option to explain your answers included, but the real test will.